Hey, we're back with another episode of Get Rich, the podcast helping you do just that. Get rich and stay rich. If you've got like a HECS or HELP debt, you've probably wondered, should I pay it off ASAP or am I better off investing that money instead? And with recent changes to indexation, wage thresholds, and the impact on borrowing power, the HECS game has changed. In case you need a quick refresher, HECS-HELP is a loan from the Australian government that you can use to pay your student contribution amount. But how you manage it can make a big difference to your future. So today I'm joined again by the awesome Jess Brady, financial advisor and founder of The Greenhouse, who is here to break it all down. So if you ever felt confused about HECS or you just have ignored it altogether, this episode is for you. And of course, if you're loving the podcast, we would love it if you would hit that subscribe button or even write us a review. Yeah, we would love that too. I hope you enjoy this epi. All right, we have got Jess Brady back from The Greenhouse, and she is going to be chatting with us about how HECS works. So Jess, we get a lot of questions from people all about HECS. How's it calculated? Should they be prioritizing paying it off first, or, is it going to affect them getting a mortgage? So I thought, I know you do some great content on your Instagram, and I'll put in the show notes how you can find Jess on Instagram. But I thought, let's have a conversation about HECS/HELP, depending on your state and where you're from. So I thought we could just start with kind of what is HECS? As everyone aware, are most people aware if they have a HECS debt?
So I think technically it is HELP debt. We've just I think we've all just collectively decided, we've known it as HECS for long enough. We're keeping that. Effectively what it is a student loan. Why we don't just make things what they actually are and we like to create more confusion and jargon, I really do not know. Think about it as
another acronym which has nothing to do. Right. Like higher education loan, something rather, probably.
Payments, I don't know. But no one ever knows because all we just think about is, that's our student debt. So if you've been to university and you didn't pay up front, it is very likely, unless you got a scholarship, that you have a HECS debt.
Awesome. And when do we start repaying that HECS debt?
So it's a somewhat controversial question, and that's because of the timing. So we are in Jan 2025 when we're recording this. So currently, if you own less than $54,400, somewhere around there, you actually don't need to make any repayments on your HECS. Now, why I'm saying it's controversial is because 2025, let's all just take a deep breath and brace ourselves for an election year. We're now starting to see election promises. And one of them from Albo and the team is that if he gets in, he's going to change how the bans work. So depending on when you're listening to this, I would always recommend with anything when it comes to money, go and check and see what the latest info is. But currently, as at Jan 2025, if you're earning less than 54,400 and something, you're not required to make any repayments. Now, as your income increases, the percentage that you will need to pay back increases all the way to like nearly 160,000. I think about 10% of your income needs to be paid.
Right. Okay. Awesome. And how does it get calculated? Because I know, is it the indexation that's the interest you pay? How does that all work?
So the reason that I think there's been so much chatter around HECS, which frankly, I've been giving financial advice for a really long time. No one gave two hoots about HECS debt years ago because inflation was so low. It was like the least of anyone's dramas or issues. Now, over the last few years, though, through the cost of living crisis that we've all enjoyed, inflation has gone up and therefore people have been smacked with a really high indexation amount on their HECS debt. And for the first time ever, people are starting to go, oh my God, what the hell is going on? In fact, I've been making repayments all year. And not only have I not gone forward, meaning that I've paid off more debt, my debt has swollen. So to combat that, there have been changes to how they calculate HECS. So the new way is, again, just to add some more acronyms in to confuse everyone, it's either CPI, the Consumer Price Index, or WPI, the Wage Price Index, whichever is the lower. So what they're trying to figure out is, of each year, which is going to give you the lower amount, and that's what they're going to use. Now, this is going to be backdated, so it is likely that you're going to be a little bit further ahead because any amounts that need to be credited will come off your HECS debt. If you've already paid your HECS debt off during that period, you're likely to get a refund. There's a calculator online where you can figure that out. But I think it does present a really interesting opportunity for people to start thinking about, okay, based on my income threshold, based on the average indexation or applied rate to HECS, am I just going around in circles here? Because the other quite average thing that they do, in my humble opinion, is they make you pay HECS all year long. You'll probably see it come out of your bank account, and yet they don't apply the indexation until the end of the year, as if you haven't made any of those repayments. It's wild. It's
so what
wild.
you're still paying interest every month, even though you're actually paying, and then they just don't charge you at the end.
Mm-hmm.
That's dodgy.
It's dodgy. It's dodgy. And so what I want people to think about, and look, this obviously needs to be taken in the broader context of your life. Like if you've got no emergency savings, you've got your credit card that's up to your eyeballs, like you need to prioritize, things that are going to help you sleep at night and give you some financial wiggle room. But if you're on an income threshold, let's say you're earning like 65,000 and you're only paying 2% of your income back, but on average, you can see that the last few years of indexation that's been applied has been over that, then what that practically means is your HECS debt is growing every year. And so that might be something that you're alarmed by and think, okay, well, I don't want to stay in HECS debt forever. Maybe I need to do something to increase how much I'm contributing so that I'm not going around in this loop. Molly, when we run the world, we'll obviously do things quite differently. I really feel like there needs to be a couple of very, very big changes. There needs to be an indexation freeze, especially for people who haven't reached that income band. So if you're earning less than 54,000, you're not legally obliged, or you're not required to pay any of it back. And some people see that as like, great, amazing, I'll deal with that later. And when later comes, they're like, oh my God, how come my debt has swollen and grown so much? It's because you're still getting indexation. It's compounding the wrong way. We want compounding in our investments. We don't want compounding on debt.
Yeah, I experienced this when I was overseas for 5 years because they hadn't bought in. You have to pay off because now it's changed. So you still have to pay it off even if you're working overseas. But when I was working overseas, I didn't. So when I came back, I had to work really hard to pay that off ASAP, especially I think, was it 2023, index was at 7.1%, or it was super high?
Yes. So it was a wildly high rate, but what they've done as part of that sort of remediation, if you will, so they're backdating it. So it was 7.1. They're reducing that down to 3.2.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Right.
But people felt that 7.1. And again, that was the trigger where people were like, oh, I maybe need to take this whole thing a little bit more seriously than I have in the past.
Oh, I think I was like that too. I was like, oh, this is you kind of think of it as it will just get paid off when it gets paid off. But when it's increasing, you're like, what? Yeah. So you want to maybe definitely put a little bit of spare cash towards that. All right. So we've talked about how it's calculated. So obviously the pros of paying off your HECS is, you're avoiding that index. And, for some people, they just like to be debt free. What about some of the cons of paying it off early? Are there any cons?
I mean, yes, there's always trade-offs. With any financial decision you make, there's potential benefits and there's potential trade-offs and pitfalls. So practically, if you decide, nah, I'm really hell-bent on being debt-free with this student loan, then what you need to think about is, okay, well, is that going to mean that I don't have as much money in my savings account? Does that mean that I don't have any surplus to start investing or build, I don't know, a fund to go on holidays or buy a property in the future or whatever it is? So we're always trying to figure out at what cost.
Yeah.
And is that trade-off an appropriate one for me? Now, I feel like the natural one that I get asked about, and I know you probably get asked about it as well, is around property.
Yes. And does it affect how much you can borrow?
Such a conundrum. So to answer really simply, yes, it does. So whenever a bank is going to lend you money, they want to know more about you. Hey, who are you? What do you earn? What do you owe? Who are you financially dependent for? Does that make sense? Dependent for? I don't even know. Who are your dependents?
Dependent. Yeah.
Who's relying on you?
Who's dependent on you?
Oh, God, we got there. And so, of course, if you've got any type of debt, the banks want to know about it, and that's going to reduce the amount that you can borrow. Now, here's the conundrum. If you've got a HECS debt and you really want to buy a property, the trade-off I think you're making is, do I go with a bigger deposit and keep money in my property goal account and just slowly pay off my HECS, knowing that it's going to mean that the bank is going to lend me less? Or do I go with a lower deposit, really focus on getting down my debt and have a higher amount that will be loaned to me? Now, there's obviously a few cascading questions off the back of that, particularly if you're someone who has, say, someone who could go guarantor for you. So if you have someone who can go guarantor for you, so you don't necessarily need as much in cash for a deposit, then obviously the priority for most people is, okay, great. Then how can I make sure that I'm normally borrowing as much as I can? What I would honestly want you to think through is if you don't have a deposit, you're borrowing a larger amount, that can be quite a shock to the system. So like test that out to make sure you can actually live with your sanity to do that. But like, I think that that is worth thinking through. If you don't have anyone to go guarantor, like this is at the point where I'd say go and get a good mortgage broker, get them to scenario test everything for you. And then you're in the best possible position to figure out what to do now. The other thing that I feel is quite important to note, and this is a personality style sort of concept. And I think you have to be honest about yourself and who are you right now, not who is the aspirational version of you that you are working towards becoming. Yeah. Because HECS doesn't get applied until, let's call it the end of the financial year, May, June, etc. Sometimes people want to keep their options flexible. And so rather than making additional repayments, they want to keep it in their bank account. And at the end of the financial year, they might do it as one big deposit. You obviously need to make sure you allow enough time for it to be received by the ATO, but it just gives you a little bit more wiggle room if you're not 100% sure on your strategy. However, if you're the type of person where you know you're going to open your bank account, see it and be tempted to spend it or go on a holiday or buy the bag, this strategy is not for you.
Yeah. And I guess as well, Jess, and obviously this is not financial advice, but as far as having that money in a high interest savings account that you're holding there, that you're not looking at, not touching, the money's just going in, would that be another kind of strategy to be, so instead of sending that money off every month, at least then you're making a little bit of return on it?
Yeah. I mean, I always think about setting up systems and automations to try to like safeguard you from you. And so, yes, like you can't see my face, but I'm like, yeah. Like if you're a number cruncher, sure, you can do the numbers and be like, yes, especially because, as I said, like the HECS doesn't get, the repayments that you make don't get applied until the end of the financial year, and they're going to charge you indexation on the full amount, which is dodgy, as we've already said. So yeah, you could hack it. You could get a high interest savings account. You could get that interest for the year. Again, just come back to, am I the type of person that's then going to look at that at the end of the financial year and be like, oh, do I really want to pay it off that boring HECS, or do I want to go and do something fun with it?
Yes.
And practically, am I actually going to remember to do it? So I think there's just some hygiene and honesty sort of things to think about there.
Yeah, love it. And then just the last question on HECS that we get a lot is, are you better off, again, very similar, I guess, to the home loan, are you better off investing that money in the share market, you know, making a 7 to 10% return versus putting it into your HECS where you might be paying 4 to 7. So I guess this one's around people always like, well, with the math, what works better?
I mean, returns are never guaranteed.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just need to kind of keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. And when we had an indexation amount of like 7%, there was a real risk of like, okay, well, we're taking on a lot of risk by investing this for potentially not that much alpha or investment, outperformance to an amount of money that we know we're going to be charged because we know what current inflation rates are. However, now we've got this way of being able to be assessed either on CPI or the wage price index, depending on which is lower. I think it does then make investing more attractive, because if you look at historical long-term returns for growth or high growth portfolios, we are looking at a significantly higher average annual return than, say, 3 or 4%. But again, come back to what's your goal? What's really important to you? What does it actually, like, a lot of people think that they can only do one thing. It's like, Jess, tell me the one thing that's going to like turn my life around. I'm like, if only there was just one thing. Yeah. And so if you have a few priorities, which most people do, is there a nice tension point where you aren't giving up any of them, but none of them are at 100%? So maybe it's unrealistic if you're spreading your money way too thin, but if you've got 3 or 4 really key priorities, where is there that middle ground? So you maybe are investing some of that money, maybe paying some off your HECS debt or boosting your super or doing whatever you want to do. Obviously, we have some like emergency things to think about first, and that is if you don't have emergency savings, must start there. Bad debt, I would always recommend you clear that before you even think about making additional repayments to HECS, super, or starting to invest. But I think this comes back to like, what do you want to get done? What's important to you? And what does making that decision mean for your other priorities?
Yeah. Absolutely love it. And guys, if you're listening to Jess and you're like, oh, she's so good, she's so great, I want to hear more of Jess. Jess, you have your own podcast as well.
They let me have my own podcast, Molly. It's wild. I just rant and rave about things.
You're
all the time.
amazing. So how can people find it and what is it called?
You can find it wherever you get podcasts. I feel like that's how the professionals say it.
That is how they say it. It's like when they do books, they're like, where all good bookstores will have this book.
Yeah, exactly. It's called Financially Fierce. It is available on all of the podcast places. And yeah, it's been going since March of 2024. And I'm always shocked, surprised, and delighted by how many people tune on in, send me DMs on Insta, and ask questions for, topic episodes, which is awesome.
Absolutely love it. We'll put all the links in the show notes so they can check it out, and also to Jess's program as well if you would like to check that out. But Jess, this has been an awesome chat. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot about HECS. There was a lot of info there I had no clue about. So thank you for coming on and sharing with our community.
Always a pleasure to talk to you, Molly. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.